Good evening. Welcome to the Warrant Committee. It's March 31st, 2025. And we have Karen today with us on Zoom. Karen, could you read our roll, please?
I can. We have Tom Caldwell, Steve Rhines, Lori Connolly, Liz Dillon, Jay Fundling, Andrew Coe, Macy Lee is on Zoom, Peter Mott is there, Julia Maxwell is on Zoom, you have Brian McGuire there, Aman Nagassi on Zoom, Ron Sia, and Judy Steele is on Zoom. You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for being here this evening. So you see from our agenda, we have a couple of items. We're going to be dealing with our planning board articles that were just voted on this past Thursday by the planning board. But more importantly, we have the Community Preservation Committee here to present on some of the work they've been doing over the course of the past year and their plans for the future. And they have some articles that they're asking town meeting to consider. So we have two representatives from the Community Preservation Committee, and I'd ask them to come up and join us at the table. And feel free to introduce yourself, and we'll get started.
Great. Thank you. I'm Tom Callahan. I'm the chair of the Community Preservation Committee, Precinct 4 town meeting member as well.
Jenny Russell, vice chair and citizen representative on the committee.
Nice to have you both.
Thank you.
The table is yours.
Okay. We have a short presentation, just going to run through kind of a high level overview. The Community Preservation Act is still relatively new in Milton, so we try to take every chance we can get to give folks, residents, some background about the CPA, and then we'll get into the Warrant articles.
Absolutely, Tom. So Tom, just say next slide when you want us to.
Perfect. So the next slide is just to who we are. Community Preservation Committee was appointed by the Select Board 3 years ago after passage of the CPA in Milton. So I'm currently the chair. Joe Duffy represents the Housing Authority. Wendy Garpo is representing the Conservation Commission. Peter Jackson is a citizen representative. Rob Levash is representing Parks and Rec. Kathleen O'Donnell, another citizen representative. Cheryl Tagayas represents the Planning Board. Jenny, as she just said, is a citizen's representative, and Linda Weld represents the Historic Commission. So there's 6 sort of seats for commissions and committees in town, and 3 at-large, if you will, seats that are appointed by the Select Board. This is just a slide. Also, just always take the opportunity to advertise that we have funding availability on an annual basis, and we're starting to get ready for next year's funding round. So eligibility applications are due on May 30th. So that's a preliminary sort of application that's pretty streamlined, that allows community members to propose a funding project, and then we determine its eligibility and invite those that are eligible to a full funding round that would be due on September 26th. And after that, we go through a process of interviewing the candidates, the applicants rather, and making decisions. Next slide, please. So the Community Preservation Act has been a state essentially enabling law for 25 years now. It passed in 2000, signed into law by Governor Cellucci, and it allows Massachusetts communities to put to the voters, the only way it can pass is through a voter referendum, a 1%, 2%, or 3% surcharge, up to 3% surcharge. In Milton, we chose to put before voters a 1% surcharge on the property taxes with some exemptions. The money raised is matched by the state every year at a certain level, depending on how that trust fund from the state is, how robust it is every year. So, and we can get into that, but there's always a state match that matches at least part of the locally raised revenue. And the uses can be, the monies can be used for 3 purposes: affordable housing, open space / recreation projects, and historic preservation projects. So there's 3 buckets. 10% of the revenue has to be spent in each of those 3 buckets every year, or at least reserved for spending at a later date in those categories. And 70% can be flexible spending among those 3 uses. So you could potentially spend 80% of your money on one use in 1 year, 70% of all of the flexible money. It also allows 5% to be used for administrative expenses too. So this is a little fact sheet from the Community Preservation Coalition, a statewide nonprofit that oversees a lot of and assists cities and towns with implementation, with passage of the act. So as of now, 200 cities and towns have passed CPA. So an incredible success rate in 25 years. 70% of Massachusetts residents now live in a CPA community. $3.4 billion raised, 37,000 acres of open space, over 4,000 outdoor recreation projects, 13,000 housing units created and 19,000 supported, and then over 7,600 historic preservation projects funded. So it has a very, very impressive track record throughout the state. The next slide, please, is really this is a little bit looking ahead to hopefully a favorable vote and town meeting. But this is the recommendations from the CPA committee over the first 3 years. And this gets you a little bit of the Milton analysis of how we spent our money. So over the 3-year period, we've recommended $3.8 million in funding. And the split has been 1.6 million. The 41%, a little over 41% have gone to open space and recreation projects, where we get the most number of applicants. That's the biggest demand. 1.2 million for community housing or affordable housing, and just a little over $1 million for historic preservation projects. So Jenny might want to speak to this too, but we've tried to, we don't have a policy on this, but we've tried to treat each leg of the 3-legged stool relatively equally. We get different amounts of demand for projects in different categories, but we've been trying to say, we like the 3-legged stool of the CPA. And so that's why you see it's not exactly a third, but it's pretty darn close, all things considered, given the choices we have to make every year. So that's the scorecard, if you will, from Milton.
Let me just add, Tom, that there was, this represents about 36 different projects over the 3 different years. And that doesn't represent the eligibility projects that we considered. So the first year we funded or recommended to be funded virtually all of the eligibility applicants that came in. The news hadn't quite spread yet about this opportunity. And year 2, it didn't quite double, but by year 3, it's doubled in terms of the number of eligibility applications we received. So word is now out about this, which is great. I mean, it's a wonderful opportunity. And the funding is sort of stable at about $1 million a year. It has shrunk a little bit. It depends upon what the state match is. The Milton contribution is pretty stable. We know that. We can project that out, but we can't project what the state's going to give us. So it's a rough estimate.
Yeah, and we should point out the reason it's 3.8 million. Jenny's right. We're collecting we're going to have the expectation of giving out about $1 million a year going forward, and that will go up slightly every year, hopefully. But the why do we give out 3.8 in 3 years? The first year was essentially almost 2 years of revenue collection because it took the committee a while to get appointed. And then once we got appointed, to get up and running. And so by the time and then solicit projects, all that startup time took some time, of course, and therefore we had almost 2 years of revenue collection. So we were able to give out 1.7-ish million, I think, in the first year. So that explains the larger than 1 million per year total. So trying to maybe anticipate a question down the road. So next slide. So there's 2 articles in front of town meeting this year, as always. The 3 years have been the same. There'll always be these 2 articles. First one, I think it's Article 34, if I'm not mistaken, is I'd like to say an organizational article. This is just looking ahead to next year. The statute requires us to get a vote of town meeting to basically estimate our budget for next year. So it's the CPA surcharge, as Jenny was just referring to. We're in our financial liaison on the committee, Pete Jackson, works very closely with Amy Dexter and Joanna McCarthy to come up with this revenue estimate. We don't just do it ourselves, but we work with the town accountant and town treasurer to get that number from them. So they're estimating the locally produced surcharge will be around 890,000. We try to estimate a conservative state match, in this case of additional 140,000. We have been earning some investment income of an additional 20,000. So a conservative total estimate of our revenues for next year would be $1.05 million. And then the organizational part of it is really setting aside by statute. Again, we're required to set aside 10% in each category in these historic preservation reserve, community housing reserve, and open space and recreation reserve. So it's kind of uneventful article essentially because it's just sort of looking ahead to next year. These numbers will actually change based on actual revenue, and we'll probably have a slightly different total to spend next year, but it is our best guess of looking ahead a year. Next slide. The second article is the one that generates the more excitement, hopefully, at town meeting. And we've been fortunate to have broad support at town meeting and from the Warrant Committee in the past 2 years. So we appreciate that.
More than broad, almost unanimous.
Yeah, almost unanimous, I think.
Save for one vote.
Yeah, exactly. So we have pulled it out of the consent agenda the last 2 years because, again, going to what I said at the top, we'd like to, since it's so new still, it's only year 3 of this, we talk to residents all the time that are just hearing about it or haven't heard about it, or what's the CPA about again? I've heard about it, but I don't really know what it's for. So we try to use town meeting and doing a short presentation on town meeting floor to continue that education. We know a lot of people watch from home. Obviously, town meeting members are in the room. So we feel like it's still in its infancy, and it's good to have a broader awareness of what what the possibilities for CPA can be. So here is this Warrant article is basically our recommendations, and I think I'll just take a step back and we can answer any questions. I won't go through. You can read those recommendations, but our process, as I sort of alluded to quickly before, is really in May, going through round 1 of we collect eligibility applications. It's the time where it's a streamlined application, so we're trying to encourage a lot of people to apply to us. We occasionally have had to say, okay, that project is not eligible based on the statute, based on the CPA funding eligibility criteria, but so it's our chance to either advance in almost a high percentage, 90+% get advanced to the full funding round stage, but it's our chance to meet with applicants determine their eligibility, give them any initial feedback based on what they've submitted to us. So we don't necessarily meet with every single applicant at that stage. If it's an experienced applicant and somebody that's been through the rounds before, we just kind of notify them that they're advanced. But for the most part, we're meeting with a vast majority of eligibility applicants and having an early conversation about the project and what stage it's at. And just so we're learning ourselves at an early stage. Then we're getting a full application with support letters and full budgets for us to dive into, and project plans and that type of stuff by the fall. And then our committee goes into high gear and really meets with every single applicant in person at a table just like this, and upstairs, right? And it's a great opportunity to learn about the current status of the project, because some months have elapsed from the eligibility round, and also for our 9 members to ask questions and get into a conversation with the applicants. After that usually takes, with 14, 15, 18 applicants, it can take several meetings to go through that. Not telling you anything you don't know as the Warrant Committee, and then we go in public meetings, debate the projects and debate how much, try to match that to our budget and figure out what projects we can fund, what project we might not be able to, or we feel like are not quite ready for funding, maybe could wait to next year. Those types of tougher decisions we've had to make in years 2 and 3 when we didn't have enough funds to fund the complete. At the eligibility stage, I think this year we had almost $5 million, or 4? Is it 4? Yeah, in applications or applications for funding for $5 million, and we only had $1 million to give. So now that got narrowed down a little bit because a few projects dropped out and weren't ready. But that's the initial oh wow moment that we were faced with this year. But it's a pretty robust process, we feel like, and it allows us to really, I think, get our hands around the projects and really engage with the applicants and get to ask them some good questions about other funding, matching funds. We'd like to fund projects that have some other outside sources of revenue coming in and that we're not 100% of the project. We also have taken an approach that we really like to fund a mix of town department priorities. Parks and Rec has fared well. Conservation Commission has fared well over the 3 years. Those are just 2 examples of town entities, town departments that have come to us. The select board themselves have come to us with project. So we like to fund a healthy mix of town department priorities, but also citizen-led initiatives. We think CPA is, obviously, like I said at the beginning, it was voted in by the voters. It only exists because of support among our residents and our voters in town. And I think it's when it works best, it encourages that type of citizen involvement, resident involvement. And we've been fortunate, especially I think as years gone along, getting really some creative citizen-led projects that we have been fortunate to be able to fund from time to time. So we'd like to think that that's a good balance and a good healthy mix going forward. This is the next slide, please. The next 3 slides are just samples of some of the projects we funded or we're proposing to fund this year. This would be our 2nd year with Milton Cemetery. They have applied for monies to take a look at renovations to the receiving tomb, which some of you may be aware of, but is a really important feature in the landscape of the cemetery. It's 145 years old and it has received little to no maintenance. And it definitely needs there's some structural changes that have been made that maybe eventually will compromise the structural integrity of that important historic feature of the cemetery. So the cemetery has applied, and we were able to recommend them as one of the funding projects. Next slide is an example of a couple different types of projects that have come to us recently. The Collicott and Cunningham PTOs have been applying to play yard, in this case, play yard improvements in the back of Collicott and Cunningham, making it safer, putting in that, I don't know what that turf is called, but it's softer, more safer surface, and other improvements to that play yard. And then finally, and these are just samples of obviously our 13 funded projects. But the Wharf Park, we've been able to provide some funding for not all of what they need. That's a big $1.1 million project, but we've been able to support an application from the Select Board to continue to forward that project, move that project forward. So that would be, we were very excited to see some of the design plans for the farmers markets and some of the events that even could be held in what could be a very signature park here in Milton, or the restoration of a signature park there that could host a broader array of events than it currently does. So anyways, that's I will stop there because I've done enough talking, and see if you have questions for Jenny or myself.
Sure. Thank you very much. Lovely presentation. Thank you for all your work you've done over the past several years. I must say that pulling it out of the consent agenda is a good idea.
You like that? Okay.
I do.
All right, good.
I think as a town.
Sometimes my friends sitting next to me in town meeting don't agree with that. It's like,
Yeah.
No.
Understood, but I
No.
think for the initial, you are still a relatively new committee, and
Right.
there's a lot, there's money moving around. So I
Yep.
think it's good that you're allowed to explain and kind of show everybody the mission
Yep.
of CPC and,
Yep.
and things you've been doing. So I think it's a good idea.
Good.
I will open it up to the table. I'll start it off with just a question about your public process. This is just more for maybe anyone watching at home, but you do have a pretty robust public process, I think, within the CPC, right? In terms of just bringing people in, neighborhoods. Like, can you just explain some of that public process that you have with your projects at the committee?
Yeah. Do you want to start? Or
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. We try to get at all sort of levels. Just a couple of weeks ago, we had an open forum at the COA, and that was publicized through Milton Times and all of the websites and Facebook and et cetera. And pretty much all of the social media potential things, we announced the deadlines, and again, through the Milton Times, it's advertised. The Milton Times has been particularly good at recording both the eligibility applications, the final applications, the votes, and everything, and describing all of the projects. So that's sort of our best bet. We're hoping to actually spend a little bit more time on really publicizing the projects. So we're at a point now where we do have signs. Signs have been up, Turner's Pond and several others, but they haven't stayed up. We don't have a permanent sign yet. So we're thinking about, okay, how can we design that so people know when they see a project that, oh, this was in part funded by the CPA. So that will help, just having that visibility readily handy. I frankly think our website could be improved. Probably that's part of the town. We need more photographs, professional sort of oomph around that. And at the same time, we're receiving more than we can fund. So at some point, it's like, well, how much do you have?
How much? Yeah.
I certainly feel like we've done our public duty in terms of putting it out there. And it's a question of whether folks, pick up on it or not. What do they read? What do they see? What social media are they on? And getting the word out. Once projects are out there, then people will begin to know about it because they'll obviously tell their neighbors and community about it.
The other thing I would just say is and kind of give you an insight into some of the debates we've had on the committee. So as we described, there are two rounds of, the first round of eligibility and the second round, which is the full funding round. I, as Jenny can testify, I have questioned whether we need both rounds and whether we need to bring in the applicants in both rounds. And I've been disabused of that notion by both my fellow committee members and also some of the applicants, that they've enjoyed actually coming in to get early feedback on a project. Because a lot of times it's not a yes, no, you're eligible or not eligible. Most of the projects have been eligible, but it's learning more about CPA, what would enhance their ability to get funding. Wharf Park came in with 1.1 million requests when we only had $1 million to give out. I mean, they kind of knew that we weren't going to get 1.1 million, but so we work with each applicant at the early stage to say to level set expectations of like, okay, this is what we have each year. And to encourage private fundraising and other outside sources to engage in a dialogue with the applicant of like, what are you thinking about other sources of potential funding for your project? And I think in some cases, hopefully, we've been helpful in rolling up our sleeves with the applicant to sort of brainstorm and help them find full funding eventually for their projects. So we've I think we're going to keep that two-level engagement and encourage that type of dialogue because it again is a learning process, I think, for everybody, and it allows us to have, I think, a greater appreciation for how the projects are advancing over the 6-month period where we're considering applications.
Great. Thank you very much. It's very important. I find it to be very important, and I think you do great work. Thank you, Tom and Jenny. Does anybody?
I do.
Steve, Liz?
Sure. Hey, thanks for all your great work. We've benefited in my precinct 7. Andrew's with a water filling station.
Yes. Yep.
Thank you for that. It's awesome.
We were happy to fund that. Again, an example of a citizen-led project coming in from the East Milton Neighborhood Association, and
which we're members of, yes.
And yes.
Andy.
And Andy did a good job representing.
Did it get in?
Yeah.
Did it get in?
I don't think it's in yet, is it, Liz?
Soon, though.
Soon, we hear.
Yeah.
We need a sign there then.
We're excited about it.
Yeah.
I've just got a couple questions for you.
Sure.
Really interested in your process. I'm on your website. Where can we see more information about the submittals? Is that public information?
The submittals as they come in, you mean?
Yeah. So the list you have that you showed us earlier, are these all approved projects or are they still in the process?
No, in the presentation, those are approved projects.
Right. So is there more information about those projects that have been approved, or is that something you, as a taxpayer, I'd be interested, is that information available on your website that says, here are the projects we have awarded where your 1% is going?
Yeah.
And, here's what the match is. That would be really helpful information, I think, given the town's situation with taxes.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I don't think, other than getting a list of the project, the project description and the
or copy of their
award
submittal
amounts and stuff like that. I know the full submittals that we get, it's on a shared folder for the committee members. It would have to be probably synthesized a little bit because it's a lot of files to go through, but I think we could put more information about the project application.
I think it'll help you market this on your website. Here are some projects like
That's
the
a
water
good idea.
filling station. Okay.
So as Jenny said, definitely one of our projects over the next year will be to revisit the town's website and figure out how we can work within the structure of the website to put more information out there.
It's a good point. We probably would need, I don't know if we need permission from the applicants, but I don't know if even there's sensitive information, but just in terms of they would know that it's on a public platform.
It'd be helpful. A couple other ones I have. Interested in the thought process behind the funding for Houghton's, which is DCR. Why not fund a project that's owned by the town, like Peverly?
Well, we are funding Peverly. We love the Peverly Park project. Peverly Park Playground, if approved by town meeting, will now have received almost 10% of our total budget over 3 years. We funded it at $40,000 the first year, 75, and 250. So we've given out 3.8 million, 365,000 of it, not quite 10%, but close to 10%, has gone to that one playground project. Now, building a playground these days is expensive. It's not their 100% of their budget. So we know they still have a fundraising goal to meet. But we were enthused. I think all 9 members were wildly enthusiastic about trying to see Peverly to a successful conclusion. The DCR project at Houghton's Pond is another project that we had I understand it's a DCR property, and but it's a project we had a lot of enthusiasm for. So first of all, Joe Kane is the president of a nonprofit called Rise and Thrive. Joe is a Milton resident. He's also a teacher at the ABCD high school, alternative high school. He uses the Rise and Thrive nonprofit he applied for and got permission from DCR for their historic assets program, and I probably have the wrong name for it, but DCR has been actively seeking partners for saving and reviving some of their historic assets. So it's my understanding is the deal is DCR is providing a very low cost or no cost long-term lease to Joe's nonprofit called Rise and Thrive in exchange for the vendor there, in this case, the nonprofit, taking on maintenance and capital improvement responsibilities.
Nice.
So it is a partnership with DCR. We'd love DCR to chip in more cash, but they are providing a benefit here. Mm-hmm. And so Joe has made a number of capital improvements to the cooking area in terms of that, because they cook hot dogs and other types of refreshments. Our money is for more some of the exterior. That pavilion was a Works Progress Administration 1930s era project. And so kind of some of that wood is crumbling and, deteriorating and really trying to restore some of the elegant beauty of that WPA project. So we feel like that was relatively short money for an asset here in Milton, albeit a DCR property, but a Milton-led resident sort of project. And they're employing students from that alternative high school at the pavilion for the summer refreshments. So it's a job training program as well. I actually met when I went out there and did not really a formal site visit, but just checking out projects that were. And Joe introduced me to one of the young women who's, senior year on her way to college and was working there and really earning some money, but also getting some job training skills as well.
Awesome. And just one last question for you. I noticed a dip in your investment income. It dropped last year to this year. Why is that?
For
your
next,
yeah, in the article, it looks like you dropped from 50. Yeah, to 20. What?
for the estimate for next year.
Mm-hmm.
Pete would probably be able to give you the best and most complete answer, but my sense is that's a ultra conservative estimates from the town departments. I have this tug of war where I try to get them to give us a little more realistic estimate, but they are erring on the side. I think it'll probably be north of that. But
I wonder if it was cumulative too.
it is a
Last
little
year.
cumulative, and as we spend down some of the money, there's less money in the reserves. So they're maybe anticipating more money out the door. So it's, but I suspect they're just being ultra conservative.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it.
I'd also like to comment on your first question because I think it gets back to this notion of leverage. So we often ask in our applications, who else are you getting funding from? Well, that will happen from others who are funding or potentially thinking about funding a project. It's like, who else are you getting funding from?
Yeah.
So in many cases, especially with the affordable housing, to say that the CPA has funded this in a particular spot lends a lot of credence to a larger pot of money that's coming from somewhere else. Another example of that is in the first year, we funded the Blue Hills Observatory fence, which, as you know, is owned by the state. So it got a little complicated in terms of us recommending it, but it was a local nonprofit that wanted to historically restore the fence around the observatory. And the state put in a lot more money than the CPA did. So an example of they wanted to see some local support shown towards this. So it goes both ways.
And I think marketing what you're doing is important because people don't know if you don't tell them.
Yeah.
You got to tell them 3 times.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, at least.
Right. And so getting that out there, and you're doing some really great work. I mean, think about that story you could tell around Peverly, right? That's amazing. And it's not just a one hit it and quit it. You're doing 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. And that's a timeline to show build and positive partnership with the town and local neighborhoods. That's an amazing story to tell. So I think you should tell
Each
it.
one of them are a story to tell.
Thank you. Yeah, no, we always, it's definitely the fun committee to be on because it's just, we see some great projects coming before us. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Liz.
Okay, I have 4 questions.
Yes, no, yes, no.
None of the above.
Not yes, no. So, do you fully exhaust all? So I'm a member of the Milton Cultural Council. So for us, every year we exhaust all the money that we're given, and then we don't have any left. Do you exhaust all the money that you get every year? And if not, then what funding remains for the next year?
Yeah, good question. We have mostly exhausted, but we do not exhaust every last penny. I think this year we had about 50,000 left over, but so the vast majority goes out in committed projects, but we do leave I mean, it's varied, but generally a relatively a 5-figure, not 6-figure, but a 5-figure total, 50 to 75,000, I think has been roughly our sweet spot. Don't quote me on those exact numbers, but it's been in that ballpark. And we do that just in case there's something, in error in the funding estimates, or we don't get some state resources that, I think that's never happened. And we just do it to be, extremely on the cautious side. But it's the vast majority of the
It gets
available resources go out every year.
I mean, in general, I would say the answer is yes. But another aspect to that question is how much is actually spent. Yeah. So sometimes it takes years for these projects to spend out the grant that they've been giving. So there might be money in the account, but that doesn't mean that it's available.
Yeah, it's committed to year 1 or year 2 projects. Typically, the project agreements that we sign with successful applicants are have a 3-year funding
Contract or whatever.
Contract, yeah.
Okay, and then you kind of were explaining a little bit about how you try to get people to apply, but can you explain your process of making sure, if you do, that there's sort of a diversity of different applications? Like I see a few for the school, so is that part of your process to say, okay, well, we don't want to fund too many playgrounds or too many, like, how do you make sure that the applications are very varied? And then is that part of one of the things that you consider? Is that a consideration?
Yeah, I can speak for myself here. When I look at these projects, I'm thinking about that type of diversity, the diversity we already talked about between what I would call town department priorities and citizen-led initiatives. I think that balance, it's already been mentioned, the Andrews water station is a good example of a citizen-led initiative. The Pine Tree Brook study to explore a walking path throughout the entirety of Pine Tree Brook is another citizen-led initiative that we were able to fund. So I think we try to balance east-west, balance of East Milton, West Milton, school versus non-school projects. There's lots of things that I think we openly talk about in our meetings. And yes, we're conscious of that. We're funding something, I think this year, Pagoda Circle, and that was another citizen-led initiative that was really impressive of like the engagement they're doing with the community, the immediate community that lives in the Pagoda Circle, immediate vicinity, but also concentric circles out from that in that precinct, basically. So Regina Campbell Malone and others came to us with that project. So we just try to balance a lot of different things, Liz, to see how we can encourage more applicants. Matter of fact, the PTO projects have encouraged Tucker to inquire. Tucker will be the only elementary school PTO not to receive CPA funding if this year's funding round is approved, because we have funded Glover and Ellicott and Cunningham. So the Tucker PTO is got a couple good ideas for, so we expect an application from them for next year, for instance, to your point.
Your first question about how proactive are we in terms of trying to get representation, I think has varied from year to year. The first year it was very active, very enthusiastic, going out to every possible organization that we could think of in Milton to let them know about this. I would say that has been less so in the subsequent years, just because we have gotten the proposals in. So we don't feel like we need to go out as much. Now it's a question of how well and how best can we tell the story, as opposed to, hey, we got the money, come get us, come see us.
Okay, can you explain for whoever's watching at home, what the recreation master plan is and then what the affordable housing trust is? These two line items.
Yep. So the recreation master plan is the Parks and Rec department.
That was one question, by the way. Still one. Okay.
That's number 3.
One.
Yeah, that's number 3.
It was one.
It seems like it's 3 and 4.
No.
Very clever.
Yeah.
Thanks for clarification.
Good lawyers. So recreation master plan came to us through Parks and Rec. They have not done, despite their best efforts to try to get a funded recreation master plan, they have not been able to do one.
How many years?
I don't know how many
20?
years. A long time.
It's way overdue.
So it's really taking a look at the recreational needs in town, our current assets. And we were excited about this project. I know I'm saying we're excited about all these projects, but it's true. But because this will help us, it will help Parks and Rec, certainly, but it will help us do our job in terms of giving us some sense of what some of the town priorities are to fund in future capital improvements for open space, parks and recreational activities. And it's not just playing fields and that type of stuff, but looking at more passive recreation and those types of projects. So we were, when Kevin And Rob came to us, Kevin Chrism, and Rob Lavash came to us with this idea. We were really excited because I think it will help them prioritize, but it will also help us evaluate future years of funding.
And it will be done by a third-party outside professional consulting group. I can't remember the name of the consulting group that they recommended, but
which will be charged with doing a lot of community engagement. So interviewing town residents, meeting with folks. So we like that process too. Several of our projects had a really robust community engagement process themselves. I mentioned Pagoda Circle, but this is another one where the consultant's going to be charged with engaging with the users of these recreational assets in Milton and getting feedback.
it also is presented with a timeline, so we know when the final project will be done, when the final report will be done, so that the Parks and Rec and the community then can learn from that.
So 3A or
3B.
3B?
Affordable housing. 3B.
So I will take this one since I am a member of the Affordable Housing Trust as well, and I represent the Affordable Housing Trust on the CPC. So the Affordable Housing Trust was set up by the Select Board a number of years ago, possibly in anticipation of us eventually having CPA. It was set up well before the passage of CPA in 2020. But again, the state passed the statute a number of years ago enabling communities to set up municipal housing trusts as a way to facilitate the funding of affordable housing efforts in a community. And so we now are fortunate to have Affordable Housing Trust in Milton. It has 9 members on it, and they are charged with exploring potential developments of affordable housing, the possibility of expanding our affordable housing footprint here in Milton. Some of the things the trust has done with the resources CPC has provided are the most recent and most notable, I think, is $400,000 is going to the Winter Valley project. So 30, if people haven't heard, Winter Valley has received approval for a 36-unit expansion of all low-income elderly units. So it's on their current site, but expanding by adding a building to that site. So that's a great example of what Jenny was referring to earlier, where HUD is funding most of that, but HUD looks for a local match. And Winter Valley MRE, Milton Residents for the Elderly, came to the Affordable Housing Trust and asked for $400,000 and were awarded that by the Affordable Housing Trust. The other resources that CPC has given the Affordable Housing Trust were not exclusive to, but were in part to try to facilitate the development of affordable housing on the town's poor farm or the town farm at the end of Governor Stoughton Lane. So that project is still being evaluated by the Select Board or the Governor Stoughton trustees, but that is the eventual goal of some of the funding that we have provided to the Affordable Housing Trust.
And just to back up a little bit, it was a decision of the committee to award the Affordable Housing Trust rather than the committee itself trying to decide on each project that was coming before the town. It was just, we didn't have the expertise. The Affordable Housing Trust was set up specifically to do this. So let's give the chunk to them and then they can deal with it appropriately.
Right.
And then over the past 3 years, have you seen an increase year over year in the number of applications for CPA funding? And can you explain sort of that increase? Like how many and how many are
I wish we had the graph to show you. Yes, is the short answer. And I think just going to what we have said before in terms of people knowing about it, people realizing that there is funding available. Once one happens, once you see somebody with a red chair, you see somebody else with a red chair, then you see somebody else with a red chair, and the projects just become known. The neighbors talk to neighbors, and as I said earlier, word gets out about this. So it is a growth potential, even though our budget has remained somewhat limited.
I don't have the numbers right in front of me, Liz, but I think the rough growth is 12 to 18 to 21, roughly.
For eligibility applicants?
Yeah, for the full initial eligibility applicants. That's not the numbers we funded each year, but in terms of growth of applications, it's not quite doubled, but it has gone up by a considerable percentage each year. Yeah. Yeah, it might be off. It might be 12, 17, 20.
Well, we funded everything that
but
came
it's
in.
in that It's in that ballpark. Rough math.
And what
I know this is a warrant committee. You don't do rough math, but we can get that number for you though. We can follow up.
Be great.
And what we see is I think what would be really interesting to track is where is the redundancy of projects? And it's not necessarily redundancy, but where is the progression? So how many years are we going to fund Pemberley Park? How many years are we going to fund the Forbes House? How many years, et cetera, et cetera? So do you consider that a new proposal or the same proposal just making progress on the project that they're specifically working on? So it's sort of how you also categorize projects coming in. That would be another way to look at it.
Yeah, that's true. We have had repeat applicants.
Will Settlers? Judy. Online.
Thank you, John. I have a curious question. When you were giving in the beginning an overview of the committee, you indicated that properties are taxed 1% that goes to this fund. And you did say with exceptions. I'm very curious to know what those are.
Yeah. Thank you, Judy. There's one exemption that applies across the board. The first $100,000 of assessed value is exempt from the CPA surcharge. So doing simple math here, if your home is assessed at $1 million, the 1% surcharge is only assessed on 900,000 of that $1 million in assessment. The first 100 is exempt. So it's something that the state legislature probably needs to revisit and update, because when it was passed 25 years ago, 100,000 was significantly a higher percentage of the average assessed home. So there is, I think, some appetite for the state to eventually revisit that. But for right now, 100,000 of every property, commercial and residential, is exempt, and then it's taxed on the balance of that. So there also is, and Milton adopted when it passed it in 2020, a low and moderate income exemption. And that applies to both seniors and non-senior households. There's different income levels for seniors versus non-seniors, but if you meet the low and moderate income eligibility, you can apply to the Board of Assessors for a complete exemption. Those income eligible households would not have to pay anything of any part of the 1% surcharge. So, and I believe that that's on an annual basis, and the Board of Assessors has it on their website of when the deadline is that, and I think that's coming up April 30th, maybe. I don't know. I need to check that, but that we're in that annual cycle right now where seniors and others can apply for that exemption. So thank you, Judy, for reminding us about that.
Thank you for that information.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions? Andrew.
I've got a couple of different questions. One on sort of controls based. You said your budget says $50,000 roughly in administrative expenses. What's in there?
Yeah, we hire we've been working with Julia Getman, who is a town employee, but separate from her town role, she provides some staffing services to us, largely minute taking at the meetings and just some administrative. Again, there's a lot of applications. We get obviously 20 applications, but we get pages and pages of, so she kind of makes sense of that all to us and provides it on, uploads it to the shared file and is a general resource. That being said, while Julia has been fantastic, we have spent far below that budgeted 5% level. We haven't even come close to the 5%. So now with some of the things Jenny said earlier, we're looking into signage, permanent signage. Some of that would not necessarily be on us. That might be a negotiation with the project applicants. And, the example I always use is the Forbes House. We funded a project there, the barn project. Presumably the Forbes House will put up a donor wall. We would like to be on their donor wall, right? And I think we deserve to be on their donor wall because we funded that project, in part at least. So it's a negotiation, but we anticipate there'll be some costs for signage.
Advertising in the Times for meetings, that kind of stuff.
But it's been more like, I think, 1% of the budget rather than 5%. But we do set aside that 5% every year just in case there's some unforeseen expenses. But and it goes back to Liz's question too. Sometimes that revenue gets returned if we don't all the time. That's some portion of that administrative expenses gets into the reserves for next year to allocate to projects. So we don't keep building up an administrative reserve that's higher than we need, for instance.
And do you have documented guidelines on how much you do not disperse on a year by year basis, or how much you set aside for administrative reserve, or is this sort of happening on the fly?
No, we so not here tonight is the three officers essentially are myself, and Jenny and Pete Jackson, who I mentioned earlier. So Pete's out of town this week, but so he is our financial liaison to the town departments. So he's meeting regularly, actually throughout the year, with both Amy Dexter and Joanna McCarthy to make sure our budgets are in line with their budgets and really keeping a close eye on what projects have successfully drawn down some of their money, what projects still haven't. So we have a great working spreadsheet that Pete maintains with Amy and Joanna's input that gives us a sense of where we are every year, basically. And he does that multiple times a year. So we're doing, at least 6 month check-ins basically to see, okay, how much money is still in the bank, how much money is committed, and what do we have in the balance. And to that point, since we're in year 3 and about to enter year 4, and I said earlier that we give projects a 3-year period to get in the ground, essentially, and not all of them are in the ground, but so we're anticipating, we're not necessarily hoping for this, but we're anticipating that there will eventually be a project that didn't quite make it, right? That their funding didn't come through, and that money will be returned to CPA fund to reallocate. So we want to keep a really close track on that for that eventuality. As sad as that might be, it means we can put that money back out there to a project that can go forward. So it's we feel like Pete has done the bulk of the work on that, and we're greatly indebted to Amy and Joanna for assisting us.
It's pretty specific.
Yeah.
It's almost down to cents.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And sorry, one last question on the structure of the committee. I understand all the roles are appointed. Are there term limits, or I guess the broader question I'm really trying to dig at is there a way to ensure diversity of voices and opinions without sort of upsetting the cart and maintaining continuity? And have you considered like a shadow committee of advisory committee of more diverse members of town backgrounds, socioeconomic, to ensure that the projects, that the pipeline that you're maintaining isn't, I hate to call it an insider's game, but an informed person's game?
Yeah.
That's a good question.
It's a great
We have
question.
we have terms as it stands.
You have term limits.
We have term limits.
Okay.
We don't
We
have
have term limits. We have
Okay.
terms.
with terms.
We have terms. Okay.
Although we were just talking about that. That's another
And just to be clear, I don't think term limits are necessarily good. Just how do you ensure that
so
fresh ideas are constantly coming into the committee?
and this is, since you're asking, I'll just raise this. This is a little bit of an issue with I was just discussing before we came here this evening rather, with Jenny. But so we are currently all have 1-year terms. That's actually in violation of the bylaw. So it's an issue we have to go back in a nice way. I think it was nobody's intention to violate the bylaw, but I think the select board just appointed a lot of committees this year to 1-year terms. Our bylaw specifically says we need to have staggered terms. This doesn't completely address your question, but it was an attempt when we were set up. So I don't know, Jenny got a 1-year term, I got a 2-year term, Pete got a 3-year term, or vice versa. And we were supposed to keep then 3-year terms going forward so that you could only lose 33% of the committee in any 1 year, and you'd have some institutional knowledge. Probably similar to how the Warrant Committee tries to operate, something similar to that. So we'll get that restored and fixed going forward. We haven't discussed an advisory committee. That's an interesting, we kind of use these annual public forums as a way to solicit input, but those are episodic and not an ongoing advisory committee. The only thing I would say, and I don't think it would be a problem, is a lot of things we do have to follow the state statute. I can't imagine the state statute would prevent us from setting up an advisory committee. It doesn't specifically call for it, certainly, but it is a good idea, and something we should put on a future agenda to talk about, because I am a big believer in getting all of Milton kind of aware and advising our committees. Our committees themselves, right? We have an all-white committee, for instance. It's just in a town that's 30% people of color.
It's hard. I mean, you need the expertise, and you also need willingness to volunteer. So it's not.
No,
I don't blame the committee, and so the workaround in my mind is how do you get that external opinion?
Because 6 of the 9 come from the committees that are designated by the town, there's some natural rotation with that. So it is not the same committee as we started with 3 years ago.
And I think we'll look a little different next year. I think Joe Duffy represents the Housing Authority. He's not running for reelection this year. So the Housing Authority will have to nominate a new person, for that seat. That's at least one seat.
Cheryl came on from the planning board. I can't remember who she replaced.
And so I really encourage you to figure out ways to get external input without having to disrupt a working committee that's doing good work.
That's a good point.
Great point. Thank you.
Peter.
Funding question. If you were joining a bigger project and you were providing partial funding, are there rules around that? For example, if
What kind of
if
funding?
somebody wanted to build the boathouse on the wharf, they come to you first and they need $300,000. If you give them all $300,000 to do it, that's great. But if you give them $100,000, and they're raising the additional capital, and they start by spending their $100,000, and then nobody's home to build the building, but the foundation is there. Are there some checks regarding how much funding and before shovel gets in the ground?
It's a good question. That's exactly what the role of the grant agreements are for. So Kathleen O'Donnell happens to be a member of our committee. She's also a lawyer. She also happens to be somebody who in her professional life has represented CPA communities around the state. So she has had extensive experience in crafting these grant agreements to not expose the town to lost money, basically. And I would say the process that I explained earlier of us engaging early and often with the applicants, we really try to get a sense of how realistic their outside fundraising plan is. If it's pie in the sky, we've looked unfavorably on some of ththose applicants because we felt like, putting good money after bad is not, what we want to do. But ultimately the grant agreement is the protection that we don't release funds until a certain threshold is met. And every project's a little different on that, but Kathleen is hard at work protecting the town's interests there.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, great question. Great questions.
Lori.
Thanks for all your work. Great program. So of the funding that we get from the state, how has that dwindled over the past 3 years?
Was
Sorry, we can't really hear Lori. Can you repeat that, please, Lori? Thanks.
How has the funding dwindled from the state over the past 3 years?
So I'm going to go back a little further. Before we passed it, or right around the time we passed it, the state passed legislation that enhanced the state match. So the state match was funded by largely by a $25 fee on transactions at the registry of deeds. So when you refinance or get a mortgage, there's a $25 fee on filing the deed and recording the deed and some other fees. So that fee was doubled. So that was the fee in place in the year 2000. And in about, I forgot what year exactly the legislation passed, but in about 2019, 2020, that fee was doubled to $50. I think that's right. I may have been even slightly north of that. But anyways, so we benefited in year one from a 31% state match. That match had dwindled to, I believe, as low as 11%. And that restoration or that increase in that registry of deeds fee allowed communities like Milton to receive a 31% state match that first year. I believe the match was 19% last year. And we're projecting, hopefully this is conservative estimate, about a 14% state match or less, maybe 12% state match for this year. So hopefully it'll be, again, DOR always issues revenue estimates in terms of a match. They tend to be usually a point or two or three on the conservative side. So we'll have to see this fall what the match actually is. Hopefully it'll be similar to last year. But given that I just described the source of that funding, it really is highly dependent on the real estate market. The number of sales has been relatively flat in Massachusetts, but the level of refinancings when interest rates, right, for mortgages went up, nobody's refinancing, right? So, and we're still kind of in that category. So that, if interest rates decline and refinancing, little mini refinancing boom happens, that will generate some more revenue. But again, the Community Preservation Coalition, the statewide nonprofit that advocates for this, is anticipating going in the next year or two to the legislature with a sort of not a modernization, but a legislative package that would address the state match again and try to. There's only a certain number of times that you can go to that well, but the other thing, occasionally the governor has put a special one-time funding amount into CPA of 10 million or so, sometimes as much as 20 million. That hasn't happened in recent years because the state budget has been much tighter. But that has happened a few years in the last 10 or so. So again, the CPC, the statewide CPC is always advocating for a special one-time source too. But
I remember when we were voting on it, the big sales pitch that came with it too was that it was being matched at 100%. And I was like, I don't think they're matching
That was
100%.
the first time we voted on it, not the second time we voted on it.
Yeah, in 2012 when Milton turned it down.
Yeah. With 100%, yeah.
Many communities were still getting 100% match, I think, or close to that. I was involved in the campaign, so I believe we said 25%, and we ended up with a 31% match the first year. Yeah, but it is variable. The other consideration, not just the real estate market but the number of communities that adopt it, right? So we're up to 200. I think when Milton passed it, it was 170, 100 and something in that range. So another 30 communities have come on, and that the pie only gets split
smaller. Right, exactly.
Right. The success of the program is its biggest problem.
That's correct. And who invests? Is that Joanna, the treasurer? She is. And does the state have any policies in terms of shovel-ready projects, like we're ready to build a playground versus doing studies?
They don't. The beauty of CPA, sometimes the frustration, but the beauty of CPA is the state doesn't have a lot of rules. They do have the 3 funding buckets, and there are, we can't use it. The example I always use was we're putting new dugouts in Kelly Field, the baseball and softball fields, in the coming year. I think later this year that those will go in. We can't mow the grass at Kelly Field. Just can't do basic maintenance, right? That's not within the parameters of CPA. So capital improvements, yes. Maintenance, ongoing maintenance, no. So those are some basic rules. After that, it's pretty much up to communities. That's where the grant agreements come in. That's where communities can, decide their local priorities. They're really set at the local level.
The coalition has done a nice job of presenting some templates of if you can answer this question, yes. If you answer this question, then no. Proceed to the next state and that next step in the process, kind of thing. And for each of the categories, which has been really helpful to the committee, because sometimes we get applications, we're like, does this apply? Is this? Because some of them, it gets a little fuzzy around the edges of the box.
Yeah, I can imagine. Do you keep all the applications and go back to them? So if there's 5 that you didn't look at this year because you didn't have enough money and based upon your hierarchy?
We look at all of them every year.
Even the ones that you had turned down 2 years ago, you'll revisit them.
Well, no.
Well, we don't.
Only if they reapply.
Yeah.
Okay, so they'd have to go through the whole process again.
Yes.
You wouldn't just pull them out and say, we really wanted to do this, but we didn't have the
No,
money.
to be fair to every applicant, we'd ask them. It's not, we've tried to make our application process, while we get a lot of paper from folks, we try to make it pretty simple and not to discourage applicants. So, but we feel like it'd be the fairest way is to ask everybody to reapply, even if they were turned down in past years. Yeah.
So if
in the balance,
sorry.
well, the balance of it's a great question you asked about studies versus project shovel-ready projects, and it is going back to Liz's question about the diversity of projects and what we're juggling and what that is an active consideration that we're aware of, that we don't want to fund 100% studies. That's not, we don't think what the voters voted for. We're we're projecting a little bit there, but on the other hand, how does a citizen-led, here's where the Andrews project's not a good example, because that was shovel-ready. Andrew came to that with us with a pretty much shovel-ready project. It didn't need a lot of study to determine whether a water bubble, not a bubbler, but a refill station was needed there. But Jeff Stone's project on Pine Tree Brook is a great example, right? We love that project. But the study is really to take a look at Pine Tree Brook runs from the Neponset behind Steel and Rye all the way out to Yulin Rink. Okay. Some of it is a path that I use every day I live on Orono Street, and I walk down Thatcher and cut into Pine Tree Brook area and walk that path. A lot of high school students use it to get to the high school, and but that's a relatively short section of it. And it goes around Pope's Pond and stuff. So this is to really look at the right of way all along, where we might have easy access, where access would be more difficult. There's a section going from Glover towards Central Ave that is beautiful, frankly. I've walked, or I've explored some of that. Could there be a path there? So that's a multi-year project. Would be very expensive, but it needs a feasibility study. Otherwise it can't even get to stage one. So we tried to balance that. People will judge whether we're striking the right balance, but of really good ideas that we think need a feasibility study or some sort of analysis, versus things that are like the dugouts or whatever that are ready to go.
Another example of that is in the first year we had an applicant around pickleball courts, and the application was, we want 12 pickleball courts. Well, there wasn't any sense of where are they going to go? What does the community think about this? Who's going to own them? Who's going to regulate them? Blah, 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 blah. So there was a lot of issues around this. So what we recommended and what was approved was to do a feasibility study around this. So, and that was the reality wasn't quite with the eligibility application at that point. We thought it was whoa, go back and take a look at this from a number of different viewpoints, and then come back to us with a real plan.
Well, and I bring that up because I think that the studies, when you do a study, if the town, which we all know the current financial situation of the town, that if we're doing a study that potentially, if you want to run a path along Pine Tree Brook, will CPC fund the whole project versus the town, and who will maintain it versus needing 2 more staff members that we might not be able to afford.
Yeah. Fair questions.
Which is exactly why we would say, whoa, let's take a step back first and take a look what this really means.
Right.
Yeah. I think I love that idea, but it's a 20-year build up.
Right.
Those things don't happen overnight. Right. Wellesley's got a great brook walking path, series of walking paths, but that didn't happen, overnight. They built that out section by section, sort of like how bike trails get built, in the area. And so I think, I think it's thinking about all those things, but really trying to, again, is this a project worth taking to the next level so that we can more fairly evaluate what the short-term and long-term potential of this project is. But, and yeah, that would have to have multiple funders.
Oh my gosh. And then I guess, so I'm looking at all the open space, which I think you said was a lot of information, was the majority of your applications?
Yeah, we get more applications for that category than any other category. Yeah.
And
Open space and recreation combined.
correct,
Yeah.
right. So like Cunningham and Collycutt, the PTO, this funding, will this actually complete their project or is it only partial?
It's partial.
So
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
would you take other money so they could complete it this year and get it done? And then like make the decision on, it seems like if all of these are just partials, do you try to focus on one or two and complete something?
They had already raised some money, I think, so it will,
Yeah.
they'll be able to do it
Okay.
Yeah,
in that particular case.
But do we like require applicants to need to get outside funding? I mean, we've talked about that a little bit and it would be.
So we have
We need,
pushed. So no, there's not a hard and fast. You have to bring outside money to it. We have definitely said to applicants pretty consistently over the last 3 years that we think having outside resources involved in your project is enhancing your application, right? It gives you a leg up because we have a stretched budget. And so, but we have decidedly not gone to the next point, which is you have to have outside money because we understand there's some projects that just are not in that stage, don't have the same capacity as other projects potentially. They're just not as fundable by an outside source, so there's lots of different reasons why I don't think, the current committee at least is going to go there, but we do encourage people to think about outside resources. And Jenny's right, the two PTO projects, we asked them to sharpen their pencils. They did. But we asked them to show us their outside funding, and they're both putting in substantial resources. A lot of our open space projects have been, the dugout project I keep mentioning, Mary C. Lane improvements, the sports leagues put in a fair amount of money, and the various sports leagues that use those fields. So the baseball, Babe Ruth, and softball, Milton Youth girls softball programs have put substantial resources, and even town residents have contributed in-kind resources as well. So
I think of the 13, there's only 2 or 3 that we are funding completely. It's 100%. Other than that, they're all have other funding coming into it.
So it's a little bit of
It's all over the
project
place.
by project, really trying to evaluate who can get by without our full funding and how we can leverage some outside resources without putting an undue burden on any one project. To set, we don't want to set anybody up to fail and here's a few pennies and go raise the rest. If we really think it's a good project, Peverly is a good example. We probably are in for about 50% of their total project costs over the 3 years, or roughly, I don't know, I can't remember the exact number. We realize that other 50% is still a big number, right? If we've funded 365, they got to raise another 300 or something like that. So that's not nothing. And that's, but it's probably the project we've funded, the single project that we funded the most in the Parks and Rec space, period. So I think we're trying to show our enthusiasm for projects and trying to get them to a place where they can be successful. I talked to Rob today a little bit, Rob Levasha, and he, as a Parks Commissioner, is working with the volunteer group, and really, he serves a role. He's on our CPC, and helping them with their fundraising plan. So we're trying to sort of bring the resources to the table to help applicants be ultimately successful, because that's what we want to see. And that's what I think voters want to see.
And do you think that the play yard improvements at the schools, will they be like that plasticky, rubbery stuff they put down now instead of like more natural?
Yes. So I don't know about plastically rubbery. I live next to Cal.
It's kind of like my blinky lights I don't like.
I equate it to, so I live next to Kelly Field on Orono Street, and the Kelly Field playground, when I walk through that playground, I bounce on that surface.
Oh, yeah, that's the plastic rubbery stuff.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't think it's natural.
It's a much safer material than the wood chips. Back in the day when my kids were little, the wood chips were an enhancement, right? They were an improvement over the concrete or the hard dirt that people fell on. But now wood chips have fallen out of favor from a safety point of view. So Collicott and Cunningham PTOs have approached us for, it's just one of the capital improvements that they're proposing, but it would be that bouncy surface
they showed us, they did have a full plan and architect's firm that they wanted to use.
It's also sun shading and making it safer because that playground gets used in school hours in summer. It's heavily used, so making it a little safer in the warmer weather too, for shade.
Yeah, will they put in trees to?
Yeah,
actually, good.
Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah. No, that's part of the plan.
Oh,
yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And can you talk a little bit more about the pine tree brook restoration? Is that the walking path, or is that the brook itself?
That's a project that is really bringing in an outside expert. So if you've walked down that path or you want to walk down that path, you'll see it's overrun by invasive species. Mm-hmm. It's really threatening the brook. It's threatening the neighborhood beyond the brook. That the Japanese knotweed, I believe, right?
Oh, yes, that's very bad.
Is nasty, and it's hard to control, and it's really expanded. It's sort of jumped the brook a little bit into the retaining areas that are even closer to the neighborhood houses. So it's a big issue that it's just a big issue. And the Pine Tree Brook Neighborhood Association came to us working with Sustainable Milton. Mm-hmm. They're going to be the fiscal agent for the funds, and hiring a consultant to advise the town and the neighborhood association, who have been great stewards of the brook, and do an annual cleanup and have really turned that brook into a neighborhood asset. But the Japanese knotweed is threatening some of that.
It's really an ecological study.
Yeah.
So this is another study that I don't really like.
But will inform sort of the
Japanese knotweed is really you can do some wrong things.
We want to get rid of it.
But some of the intuitive things can really make it spread.
Yes.
So it's really important to get some experts, I think,
absolutely
involved in that.
Yeah. And then, so now Park and Rec. So the Recreation Master Plan, is that a study again? So what about the Open Space and Recreation Master Plan that we have in place, that they're working on to update it? How is that not like the same? And
well, I'm not quite sure it was very outdated.
Well, one's an open space plan and one's more focused on recreation.
This is both.
It's not the level of detail that Parks and Rec, Kevin Chrism came to us and really, this is something he's been trying to get funded out of the town's budget 4 years.
It's not going to get done.
And had been unsuccessful, and he's felt has been needed for a while now, because there's just such a pressure on the playing fields.
Yeah.
And then there's new things like pickleball courts, and so it really is to get a handle on if we have a priority list in town, and I think CPC was actually a little bit of an impetus because they saw projects, and this goes to how do we make decisions and all that type of stuff. They saw projects, some projects that were quick out of the gate to apply for us for Parks and Rec funding. And those may or may not be priorities for the Parks and Rec department. So this will help sort of create a queue a little bit of like, okay, we want to do, I'm not saying, Kelly Field, because it's next to me, of course. Kelly Field first, and no, but but it's just, here's some of our top priorities, and that would be helpful for both them and I think for the CPC going forward.
But are they working with the Space Committee?
My understanding, I mean, you'd have to ask the members of the Parks and Rec Commission, but my understanding is that study has not advanced to any degree that is helpful in answering these questions.
Okay, because I thought they were working with Horsley Witten, is that the name? And they were moving forward with.
I don't know if it's just because it's
contract.
One is on open space and one is more on rec, but Rob Lawash and Kevin Chisholm could give you a better answer to that. And it's,
And the restoration plan at Pagoda Park, what does that involve? Is that another study?
yes. It's it's not a study. It's a community planning process. So Pagoda Circle Park is, part woods, part open field. It has no active recreation parts to it. So it's really a very neat neighborhood engagement plan where the neighborhood association around it has already solicited a fair amount of input into what people would like to see in that park. There is definitely some restoration of the forest there. To call it a forest is, it's a small area, but the wooded area. And what we can do to enhance that and keep that vibrant and strong. But also, is there support for a smaller play space for toddlers, or, it's a limited space there. It's not a big field like Andrews or Kelly or whatever. So I don't know what is going to come out of that, but it's a really unique, I think, engagement with the neighborhood. So it's more of a community engagement.
And also an education about what's there. Are there invasive species there? Are there trees that should come down, trees that should be saved? And if the trees should be saved, what do we have to do to save them?
Right. Yeah.
And so which trees do we treasure? And so it's kind of getting a community sense about like what's the priority for this small area that's all of our backyards.
Right. Okay. And what about the last one? It seems like I should be attending your meetings.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
I don't have a lot of time. I attend a lot of them, but I kind of like to do that.
The Friends of Neponset.
Yeah.
Esplanade.
So that's another citizen-led initiative. So the as you come out of Mattapan Square on Brush Hill, on the right is that brick DCR building.
Oh, yes.
That has sat vacant. I've been here 30 years, and I don't believe it's ever been used in the 30 years. So that's another building that's potentially, I think, open to a DCR historic, I forgot what their program is called, but sort of a partnership. So a neighborhood group came to us and said, we'd like to explore turning that into a Milton asset. Again, it's really they've had some good conversations with DCR. DCR is very supportive of. They would like to see these resources that they have activated in their communities rather than setting boarding up and being an eyesore. Again, it's a neighborhood planning visioning process to see, okay, what could that become? Could that become a teen center? Could that become
Canoe launching
a yoga studio? Could that become a canoe launching place? You know,
And would DCR fund the whole thing and improve the building so that
possibly.
Well, that's the idea.
That's the
we would
idea.
not do that? So we're gonna fund a study to give to them and say, we want you to spend money, $1 million to rehab the building, and then you have to man it for a Milton Teen Center or canoe launching for anyone.
Or a private business. I mean, I was just talking to Stuart Saganor, and he was talking about how a state park up in his neck of the woods in Oxford, they've or Hamilton, they have turned 2 historic buildings into a private business that's a caterer, events, center basically, and so it's a private for-profit business that is using Mansion basically as their business operations, and the other one actually turned into a single-family home, so there's creative models out there, and so I think this is a bunch of these projects, we wanted to reward what the committee evaluated were thoughtful, solid ideas that definitely have a long ramp, because they're not going to come to fruition next year probably, but is worth investing relatively short money into an idea that would really enhance the Milton experience if these did eventually come to fruition. So that's, and we're asking these questions and making the same, trying to make the same types of judgments of is this too pie in the sky that doesn't have any merit, or is this something that we think the applicant has done enough homework to convince us that it has merit to maybe take the next step, but they need this planning grant or feasibility study or analysis or community engagement or what have you, to get to the next level.
It just seems like we're doing a lot of DCR work. Ends and trying to improve and.
Yeah.
But I think with this one, where we see is local citizens seeing an asset that's not being used.
But will DCR commit to the money to fund and do all of that? I mean, are
without
they?
A plan?
Are
So
they
without a
signing
plan,
up
the answer is no.
But would they? Are the initial discussions
The initial discussions were positive, and that was one of the questions we asked, and the applicants really were encouraged by DCR's interest in their specific ideas and interest in.
I guess you can flip it is to say, would DCR do this level? At this point, probably not.
No, they totally wouldn't. But if they're expecting that Milton's going to spend the money, the capital money, or the ongoing maintenance and staffing,
Yeah, sure.
and the financial condition that we're currently in this is kind of pie in the sky. And should we be reallocating the funds to a project that we can get it done?
Yeah, I mean,
This is where it's art, not science.
yes, and we understand a different 9 people might come to different conclusions on all of this. So it is. All I can say is we take those. We ask those types of questions. We take that responsibility seriously of not just funding studies, funding a lot of project ready, projects. I think, going back to Pope's Pond a year ago, funding the second bridge in Pope's Pond so people can circumnavigate there. Those are examples. But even that, there is a related project to fund a study of how to make Pope's Pond more navigable. Right, Pope's Pond is not Turner's in terms of that path is muddy a lot. So there was a second thing we funded as part of the bridge is the bridge, and that bridge is going to go forward. But the second thing was a study to evaluate how much it would cost to make the full path around Pope's more navigable for more people, because the goal was to expand, that beautiful natural resource that is a hidden resource to a lot of Milton residents, right?
Absolutely.
So they don't know it's there, and even if they do, some people can't traverse the muddiness of it for much of the year.
The other thing is that in the early years of CPC, it may be more studies. In the later years, there may be we'll get it into the action.
Funded, actually.
Yeah. But we're cognizant of that tension and we're trying to hopefully strike a decent balance.
Well, and I do like the historic and the affordable housing stuff, so I'm good with that.
Thank you.
Any other questions from anybody? Liz.
Sorry.
Question
Other
five.
than that,
Question 5 now?
yeah, I can have as many as I want. Nature of the thing. Now you made me almost lose track of what I was
Sorry.
going to say. Okay. It could be question 6, depending on how you classify it. So, other than people who didn't meet the eligibility, have there ever been applications that you have not funded in whole or in part?
Yes.
How many of the applications have you not funded in whole or in part that you've received?
Not many.
Not many, but there have been a couple that we just didn't feel like the full application.
Or they were withdrawn.
Yeah, some of them been withdrawn. Some of them didn't advance beyond, they hadn't shown progress from, they got funding in year 1, but year 2, they hadn't shown enough progress to merit year 2 funding. There was a project this year, a relatively small project, the horse trough that we didn't fund because we felt like that was fundable outside of us, or wasn't quite ready. So there's been a handful, probably just a handful, if that.
I think there were 2 in this year.
This year, yeah.
Of the full applications that came in.
Maybe 1 last year.
The first trophy was one. I can't remember what the other one was.
So public, we haven't talked about it tonight, and I know you probably want to kick us out, but the public accessibility is part of what we push for. We funded a garden in year 1 that you help me with the name.
Yeah, thank you.
Wait. The gardens off of Fletcher Steel Way.
What's his name?
They're beautiful.
Yeah.
So that's a project we funded, but asked for more publicly accessible events so that Milton residents could enjoy those gardens. And the applicant readily agreed to that. But so we push for that. Sometimes projects don't meet the public accessibility
We come with conditions.
sort of requirement. But it's been 2 or 3 projects probably in our 3-year history that have not gotten funding that had advanced to the second stage.
I think it was the Spalding.
That's called.
Spalding Gardens. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you, Judy.
You're welcome. I have some iris that the Milton Garden Club was to raise funds from overgrowth of this particular plant, and it came with a little note saying it was the Spalding Gardens.
Oh, nice.
Nice. Yeah, it's a fun plant for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lori.
I don't know if you know the answer to this. This might be a Pete or Amy question. Is there a separate account for CPC with the town, but it's all commingled. All funds are commingled for whichever, and that's the spreadsheet that Pete's keeping and probably Amy is keeping, delineated. And so we're not giving out money until we get an invoice, then the town will pay it.
That's right.
Thank you.
Right.
Thanks.
Could I ask a question? And it's just kind of going back to the Peverly Park, and I appreciated all of Lori's questions and your answers just about in the funding and the partial funding. But when I was just thinking about Peverly, because we've heard about it for so long, it's been coming up at town meeting now, I think prior to all of this. But, you know, and I'm kind of putting on my town meeting hat, but when I kind of saw like the 60,000 for DCR and just when I see that project specifically in the line item, I look at the amount for Peverly and, you know, given the dearth of playgrounds in the area, the importance of the project to the neighborhood, would the committee consider paying for all of Peverly Park? Because I think, what are you, like 70,000 short? I'm just trying to think.
The playgrounds are expensive. I think I looked at this this afternoon, and don't quote me on this, but I think it's 627,000 is the total budget for Peverly. We have funded, like I said, 365. So would we consider an application next year for Peverly? Absolutely. We love this project. We want to see it successful. We've had, I think, good engagement from the sponsors, with the sponsors of that project. I think the issue for them really is the timing, and being shovel ready versus the other funds. I know they're, a couple of years ago, one of the pieces of advice we had for them is that they should set up a nonprofit, which they have done. So they're a 501c3 nonprofit now, which allows them to go out and solicit funds. And I know they have applications in, we thought their fundraising plan was, compared to 3 years ago versus now, was well advanced and reflective of, I think, some really hard work that they have done to think about potential funders of that Peverly Park playground. The Ice House developer, for instance, they should be chipping in. They're going to make a nice profit on the Ice House condos, and that's going to be an amenity that's a short walk for Ice House residents to Peverly, right through that Pope's Pond path. But so is that an idea? Other foundations and other. So we felt like they have put together a really good fundraising plan. And like I said, the largest single award, I think, is to them this year. And, but we would definitely, we're not shutting off.
But Tom, you understand the question where it's coming from.
Yes.
People seeing, tax assets leaving the town versus this project.
The thing I would push back on, a little bit is we're not funding DCR. We're funding citizen-led efforts to revitalize a DCR asset that happens to be in Milton, Houghton's Pond, the Truman Highway, I forgot what the Neponset Esplanade building there. So if DCR came to us, I don't think we would have looked as favorably on those applicants, but we want to reward the organizing and the initiative of Milton residents that are really taking ownership of their communities and really trying to improve them. So I understand. Yeah. I still understand the tension, but we want to do everything we possibly can to make Peverly a reality. I live on that side of town, and that's what really got us initially, is their presentation to us that there is that neighborhood particularly has a dearth of recreational opportunities, playground space that maybe other neighborhoods, other than Kelly, don't have. So we think that's a hole in our playground infrastructure that needs to be filled. Yeah.
The other thing we asked of them is, with this money, and to your question, will they be able to get started? And the answer was yes. So they will have something built with the funding that they will receive. It just won't
doing it in stages, perhaps. Okay. And we wish we had more money so that we wouldn't have to do that. The last thing I will say is the last meeting we had is a bonding meeting. We had a great discussion with Stuart Saganor. CPA revenue stream can be bonded. So Joanna and Nick Milano came to this meeting and really sat with us, heard a half-hour presentation on how other communities have bonded the CPA revenue stream. And now there's a trade-off there, right? You're paying debt service. But for bigger projects like Beverly Park or like the Wharf Park, those might be something we consider in the future. And that would be able to fund the entirety of a project in 1 year, and then pay the debt service off. But that was something we wanted to educate ourselves on as a committee, because we haven't done that yet. But many CPA communities have bonded at least a portion of the revenue stream of CPA, in part to do things that have a little bigger price tag.
Yeah, well, no, I appreciate the answer and the understanding. The Wharf Park thing looks pretty sharp.
Yeah, it does.
If that could ever come to fruition, then
it's an exciting project. Yeah,
yeah, it looks really nice. Be a jewel.
Tom, I have one more question.
Sure, Judy.
Oh, thank you so much. Did I hear you say that there's a project you're going to do on Truman Highway, Mr. Callahan?
There's a project we're funding. It's the Neponset Esplanade redevelopment plan. It's that brick building at the beginning of, I don't even know what street that is.
They're about 4
7
streets
Brush
that come
Hill.
in.
It's
7 Brush Hill. Okay, 7 Brush Hill.
Okay,
Thank
the
you.
building where that used to be the old MDC building.
That's right. That's exactly
Correct.
right.
I'm
Yep.
sorry, I
Yep.
misunderstood and I wanted to.
So it's a study to analyze what the potential for that building could be.
Because it sits squarely within our town.
Correct. That's right. That's right. And it's been unused for at least 30 years.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Anyone have any further questions for our guests or the 2 articles?
I'll just say great projects. Nice job.
Great. Thank you.
Everybody else had questions. So. Good.
Yeah, my favorite member. No questions. No, no. But thank you for that. Thank you for all of your work, because you guys have the toughest job in town. But we appreciate the opportunity to come before you each year, and like I said, it's good for us to hear your questions. It's also good, I think, for town residents to familiarize themselves in an ongoing way with what CPA can mean for the town. So,
Lori.
It's not a question. It would be interesting. I would like to see, and I'll ask Pete, but it would be great to see like what you funded in year 1 and how the money has gone out and if it's been completed, to show the trend.
Yeah.
That would be an interesting look in your presentation.
Yeah, we do have that spreadsheet, and we also have increasing, as I mentioned before, increasing interest in, as a committee, looking at that at each of our meetings, because we will start to have projects that deplete their funding, don't use their funding, like I said, so that tracking spreadsheet is going to be increasingly important as we mature as a committee.
And if a project hasn't gotten off the ground in 3 years, do you take back the money? Or do you have any guidelines around that?
We have the authority to take back the money. I think, the best practice that I've heard in other committees, we have not gotten there yet. So we haven't established any policies ourselves, but the best practice is to sit with the applicant to figure out, can they get it done in a 6-month extension, a 12-month extension? What's going on? Is it dead, or is it on life support, or is it really just they need another year? And I think it would be a conversation. So I don't think we would, at least it'd be my position as one member of the 9-person committee, that we should have those conversations to try to determine. But then if it's really dead, we should take that money back, definitely, and put it out there to maybe Beverly Playground. Just, hypothetically.
Just build it.
Exactly.
I don't see any hands up. Everybody all set? Tom, Jenny, thank you so much. We really appreciate everything.
Thank you.
And
It's been great discussion. Thank you.
with us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, everyone. Anyone want to have a discussion about our committee? Community Preservation Committee, 2 articles, refund is it 8, 9 allocations they have in Article 36?
13.
Excuse me, 13. Esplanade, Wharf Park Rehab, Pagoda Circle, Parks and Rec Master Plan, Beverly Park, Pine Tree Brook, landscape improvements at Glover, play yards improvements at Cunningham and Collycott, Houghton's Pond Pavilion, the DCR property, the Eustis Estate, masonry, restoration, cemetery, the holding tomb, which Tom and Jenny mentioned, and the Milton Arts Center, window replacement, and of course the Milton Affordable Housing Trust. That's in Article 36, approved projects and grant funding as recommended by the committee. 14 projects recommended, $1,024,964 through CPA funds. Anybody want to talk about?
Hey, Tom.
There's one thing that sort of troubles me, which is that I don't feel like they have written guidelines for pretty much anything. I would love for them to say that we'll evaluate projects on the basis of X, Y, and Z. And one, I believe, should be which has the most greatest public benefit for the residents of Milton, like broad-based benefit. Did they say they funded the garden, the Spalding Garden off of Fletcher Steel Way?
Mm-hmm.
That to me is kind of crazy. I didn't even know it existed on the map, and it is buried in a neighborhood with very few beneficiaries to it. And if this is coming out of every taxpayer, well, in theory, every taxpayer's properties taxes, I would prioritize things where it has the greatest community benefit. And I think the only exception to that, I think, is historic preservation, because it's really difficult to do that, because that money has to come from somewhere. And I think that's important also. But short of that, I'm sort of, I wish they had harder rules or guidelines around what they do. And I'm not saying the projects that they do, that they're sponsoring aren't great. It's just that it feels relatively narrow in scope.
That's fair. Lori, then Liz, and Lori.
That's sort of why I asked the last question. My understanding is that I know they were like, there are some exceptions, but my understanding of pay attention in the last 3 years to this is that they pretty much fund everything that is eligible that comes before them there were a few exceptions, but I think that if there were other applications, then like, yes, I would totally agree with you, especially the first year. I don't think there were. I remember, in that East Milton Neighborhood Association conversation, our friend Andy, who really did a great job of getting that water pump for Andrews Park, one of the things was that it was this sort of, there's CPA money all of a sudden, and we could be using it to benefit the people of East Milton. And I think people, that weren't necessarily paying attention didn't really know that it was an option, especially in that first year. And so I've seen more and more people kind of know about this now and apply, and people have been asking me as if I know anything about it, and kind of just saying, did you hear Collycott's getting this money? And I was aware of the Tucker, application that they're planning for next year. And so I think that we'll continue to see, hopefully, more and more people, like everybody, apply and learn about it. And then I think that those projects probably won't get funded, but I think that they probably have sort of guidelines that they are not necessarily formally written. But I would like to see that too, to the extent that they're not, because I agree with you, Andrew. I think that it makes it more like clear to the applicant, kind of like what we were talking about with the site plan review. Like if you have it set out, it makes it clear to the applicants. It makes it clear to everyone. Like you said, Steve, it makes it transparent. So everyone in town can say who applied. I would like to see all the applications, some kind of standard, who got picked, who wasn't picked, and what was the, criteria. So to the extent that that doesn't already exist, which I don't know that it does, I would like to see that. But so just kind of to agree with all of you. But I know that was part of the discussion around the Collycott and Cunningham play yard, because in the past, there's an area, maybe at Glover, that's not fully accessible to everyone in town because it's inside an interior
Is that a back
thing, and so they hadn't funded that because it was inside. I think that was one of the ones.
Like an atrium or something?
Yeah, it's in an atrium, and that was one of the ones that they hadn't funded because it wasn't really accessible to everyone. So to the extent that this isn't fleshed out someplace, I agree. I think it should be.
But if everybody's like, they like the idea that a neighborhood is, in a neighborhood is coming up with a plan to enhance their neighborhood, that might be accessible to the entire town of Milton, but what's the likelihood that the entire town with a broad base group is going to be using it? It's going to be the neighborhood.
Now we're all going to go have a field trip. After our field trip to what's that horrible town that we don't want to go to?
New Marlboro.
I'm sure it's lovely. Then we're all going to go see those gardens.
I was just going to invite Jada.
The gardens are beautiful. I don't know about New Marlboro.
We're not going to You're driving.
See JJ.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
No, I appreciate that.
I agree, though, too. I wanted to agree. If I didn't say that already, I agree. With the whole policy guidelines.
I'd asked him the question. They
don't have any.
He didn't.
Well, that's why I asked if the state had any requirements.
That I'm okay with. That answer I'm totally fine with. But
I like the studies bug me.
The Milton Cultural Council, that's all money from the state. None of that is your taxpayer dollars at work. But we do have like very specific, and yes, it's probably true, Lori, because that's the state, but we also have our own specific guidelines. So what we try to sort of balance, and it's all kind of set out, and we have a rubric. So to the extent that they don't have that, I think it's a good practice, just in case anybody says, how come you awarded it to these, especially as it gets more popular.
Right, absolutely.
So people are like, how come you awarded it to this person and not our person? Why this neighborhood, not this neighborhood? Why this?
Exactly, that's what's going to.
Here's our rubric. Transparent, I think.
No studies.
Yeah.
Well, I gotta say, if I can say that, I think you all knew my point. It's like when I asked Tom the question, it's like, this is taxpayer money. And, I get it. DCR properties in Milton and people from Milton use it, but we don't own it.
Now, why are we investing in not our property?
It's like we have an after school program in Quincy, so let's put a new gym in for them.
With the
I just don't.
with the number of needs a town has
That's right.
to fund something that is.
So my whole point was just why don't they just build Peverly with the money they have? Just one off, write a check. I heard about Peverly Park for 10 years. Just pay for it, get it done with, and then move on to the next thing. And maybe it's the study of the DCR. I think the products are great. I don't know. That's my only feeling.
No,
That's my
I
only-
agree. Yeah.
I think they do great work. I think it's good. I was skeptical when it was first brought forward. What does this look like? And I voted for it, and I think it is great. But that's of all of this, that's the one hair I have. But that's I don't think they do bad work at all. I think they do very good work. But I just don't like the investment in.
I also appreciate that it called out that it's an all-white board. I didn't want to say that. I was looking at the list. I'm like, okay, so how are you ensuring that you're getting diversity of views? And if you're not getting diversity of views, how do you know that all the needs of the town are being serviced?
Oh, sorry.
It's
just noise.
No. So,
Brian, Jay?
Nope.
Jay?
For the website, because they mentioned something about their website not being that good, but.
The lower basement is where we keep most of the supplies, storage, laundry.
I think somebody isn't on mute that wants to be on mute.
Macy, your speaker's on, Macy.
Build up this back.
Maybe you could mute her for her.
She can mute her. Give me a second here.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's kind of infringing.
She's
we could message her.
okay. She's muted.
So before she gives out.
She's muted now.
Yeah, she's muted.
Okay.
But one of the thoughts, I don't know enough about them. But one of the thoughts is they have a mission statement, a vision statement. And what does it say in it? And if they had one, maybe that would help dictate where the money goes. Or
Now the room is muted.
No, Ron, you're not muted, and you're up next after Brian's done.
So that'd be my recommendation. Maybe look at their mission statement and see, if it.
They have CPC responsibilities, needs assessment, develop a community preservation plan, recommendations to town meeting, recommendations on the community preservation fund, expenditures, requirement for a quorum. So they have some guidelines.
But if they don't have funding guidelines.
But not funding, but just around the nature of the committee.
Maybe go back to the beginning and start again. That would dictate where they're going to put the money.
Yes.
Ron?
Hi, can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, just one real quick comment. A couple months ago, I did meet with the Parks and Recreation folks. And I met with Director Chisholm and Curzum, and he had mentioned that I raised a lot of the questions about specific parks and specific maintenance schedules, what is their plan? And his comment was that a lot of the work that they need to do will be dependent on the master plan study that the CPC is doing for Parks and Recreation. So just putting that comment out there.
And I don't know why it's not being included with the Open Space and Recreation Committee. Open Space and Recreation Master Plan that already exists. I don't understand why that's not a more coordinated effort. But I'll follow up.
Anybody have any other comments or questions just regarding the two articles, 35 and 36? Anybody want to?
I'll make a motion
What would that motion be, Lori?
to approve Article 35 Can I do them together?
And what is Article 35?
Article 35 is to see if the town will vote to appropriate or reserve from the Community Preservation Fund annual revenues in the amounts recommended by the CPC for committee administrative expenses, community preservation projects, and other expenses in fiscal year 2026, with each item to be considered a separate appropriation and to act on anything relating thereto. And the estimated revenues are $1,050,000. And then there are appropriations for committee administrative expenses of $50,000. The special purpose reserves are 10%, $105,000 for each of historic resources, community housing, and open space and recreation. And undesignated budget reserves of $685,000.
82. 682, 500.
Wait, 685.
685.
Okay. Typo.
You have a second?
All right, I second that.
Second,
Thank you.
Liz. So seconded as to Article 35, the CPC, Community Preservation Fund, allocation of annual revenues. Karen, could we have a vote?
Sure. Steve,
Yes.
Lori,
Yes.
Liz,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Andrew,
Yes.
Macy,
Yes.
Julia,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Aman,
Yes.
Ron,
Yes.
Judy,
Yes.
and Tom.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Unanimous. Thank you, Karen. Let's move on to 36. This is really kind of what we were just talking about. And the committee appropriating the various monies, $1,024,946. Anybody want to speak to this again? Anybody have a motion? You comfortable with this allocations by the committee?
I'll make a motion
What's your motion, Brad?
to pass it.
To see if the town will approve projects and grant funding as recommended by the Community Preservation Committee for fiscal year 26. All approved projects must enter into a grant agreement with the town and submit regular progress and budget reports. Total of 14 projects are recommended, for which $1,024,946 is to be approved through CPA funds. And our recommendation to town meeting, Brian, would be to approve this. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Peter. Karen, could we vote Article 36?
Sure. Steve,
Yes.
Lori,
Yes.
Liz,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Andrew,
Yes.
Macy,
Yes.
Julia,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Aman,
Yes.
Ron,
Yes.
Judy,
Yes.
and Tom.
Yes. Unanimous.
Passes unanimously.
They haven't been.
Okay.
They haven't
Thank you, everybody. Planning board articles. Karen, can we put those up on the screen? The planning board voted on Thursday to make changes to their planning board articles. They said that they would. The chair forwarded me the revised articles that we liked when we last met with them. Karen's going to pull them up on the screen. We have 3: site plan, ADU, and floodplain. Liz.
Can I ask a follow-up? Liz's faulty memory question. So if I remember correctly, we had Yes, we liked them, but they had to go back to town council and just make sure that all of the.
Yes.
Okay.
And they had to formally vote on them
Yes.
after
Okay.
running everything by town
But nothing
council.
has been changed since then, other than implementing the changes that we discussed. Okay.
Zero, just a planning board vote. So, Karen, is this what do we have up here? I can't see.
I'm sorry.
ADU bylaw.
I'm gonna move up close because I can't see this. Yeah. Okay.
Bigger?
Yeah, perfect. So, everyone, you're going to see the red lines, and a lot of these changes were some of the things that we highlighted. There's a grammatical change. Karen, can you just go down? Okay, so the next egress and ingress,
That was it.
right? It's our change. Okay, any zoning with single family, other Scrivener.
Should there be a comma? Oh, it's cost, never mind.
Ingress again on regulations, section 1, and egress into the building code and fire codes. Section 8, as a short-term rental or otherwise, the ADU shall not be used as a short-term rental or otherwise for boarding and lodging. Liz, you remember this section?
Yes.
We
thank
discussed,
you.
yeah, this
Yes,
is something.
Thank you.
Okay, another Scrivener's error. I forgot who caught that one, Lori.
That was Lori.
So that's under G, administration and
My
enforcement.
memory is very good, actually. I say that, but Lori was Lori.
Is that it, Karen?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So
And
can
you do have Meredith here, I think. She was here at one point, if you have any questions.
Yeah, we do. We have the chair of the planning board live.
Wonderful.
Nice.
If
Thank
we
you.
have any questions to this. I don't think there is. I think we went through this pretty well. Karen, can you go back up to the top? So remember, this included also, as indicated by the planning board, a lot of the changes that were discussed at length at town meeting by the various speakers, other citizens. So everything essentially with our input has been incorporated into this ADU bylaw. And it has been reviewed by Peter Mello per the planning board and the chair who I spoke with today. So there we have the ADU. Karen, you just want to go through the other one right now, the site plan?
Or, give me 1 second.
Sure. Does anybody have any questions? Nothing
It
on
doesn't
this?
look like substantial changes, right? Yeah.
No, not after the first town meeting, the revisions, the fixes, then our fix. So it's been almost 4 drafts. Thank you, Karen. Okay, here's our site plan. This is I believe there's only one in here.
There.
Okay, wait, can you go back? Cheryl,
There.
plan, it's okay. Sorry, Karen. Oh, typo. Okay, here we go. Okay, this is the decision section. The absence of appropriate circumstances entitling the board to additional review time is defined herein. The board shall issue and file with the town clerk its written decision, either approving or disapproving the site plan no more than 120 days after the receipt of a complete site plan review application, and the failure to so issue and file a written decision within a 120-day period shall be deemed to constitute constructive approval of the site plan as submitted. For purposes of this paragraph, appropriate circumstances entitling the board to additional review time shall mean A, the applicant's consent is to extend said 120-day period, or B, the board's determination in its reasonable discretion that based upon the nature of the application and proposed project, the volume of material or information presented to the board in connection with the underlying hearing, the complexity of any technical or legal issues arising out of the board's review, and other similar factors, additional time exceeding said 120-day period is necessary to facilitate an adequate review of the application. So there we go. It's the changed language, striking the 90 days or period as may be agreed upon by the applicant. Again, as we address the appeal section, Q, where we actually put in the statute, an action filed with the land court or superior court no later than 20 days following the board's filing of said decision with the town clerk and otherwise. And of course, set forward the statute, MGL 40A, section 17.
Oh, you're fine. Okay.
The withdrawal, I forget where this one came from.
Oh, it's just because it said withdrawal of
Just
application
withdrawal
twice.
I think that's it.
Mhm.
Okay, we can speak to matter. Does anybody have any questions as to this? Again, aside from our changes that we made in this document, which were then voted on by the planning board, does anybody have anything they'd like to speak as to this bylaw as written? Again, taking into consideration planning board changes, our recommendations, and the recommendations of those at town meeting, the various citizens and speakers. Anybody have anything they want to address? Okay. Let's see if you know what number this is. The article number. I'm just going to get the article number for you guys. And then,
Closed it.
sorry, I just had the warrant open.
Yeah, I did too. I closed it.
Doesn't look like there's an article number.
$39 and $40.
Thank you. In the floodplain,
I don't see that in the warrant. Did that get moved to June perhaps?
Yes, Tom, it's Meredith. Nick Milano asked that we move that to June, the floodplain.
thank you, Meredith. Okay, we have the chair of the planning board here. Any questions? Last chance.
Yeah.
The only other thing I would mention that came up at our meeting is Nick had spoke to Cheyenne about moving the or adding the section where this should be included in our zoning bylaws. We had not heard anything from Nick on this. So in the final, in the zoning language, it allows the clerk to determine, make final determinations on that. So it might be worth having a conversation with Nick Milano on where he believes this should be placed. Or at least for the ADU, I'm sorry, on the ADU article, if it should be placed under the accessory use section. So there may be some conversation with the clerk on where they want this to be placed. And we did not make a recommendation to change it to any particular section. So it may be just left as is.
Would that matter how we vote on it?
No, it's the same article.
Right.
It would be, yeah.
These don't have numbers.
You go back here. This one that was XX. Did anyone have a question for the planning board chair?
Right there.
Right there. Okay, so the ADU bylaw, which is in an unnumbered article in our warrant. Does anybody have a motion?
I'll make a motion to pass it.
Brian?
I'm gonna read the whole article.
No.
A motion by Brian to see if the town will vote to amend Chapter 275 of the general bylaws and as a zoning bylaw, striking Section 3.2, subsection A, paragraph 6, inserting the following language concerning accessory dwelling units. Okay, so this is an amending of Chapter 275 of general bylaws and introducing new site plan language to our bylaws. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Lori, second. Karen, could you call the vote?
Sure. Steve,
Yes.
Lori,
Yes.
Liz,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Andrew,
Yes.
Macy,
Yes.
Julia,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Aman,
Yes.
Ron,
Yes.
Judy,
Yes.
and Tom.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Unanimous. Okay, so as to the next, this is the site plan approval. It's an unnumbered article. As Karen indicated, I believe these will be 39 and 40. Site plan, this is again another amendment to Chapter 275 of the general bylaws and inserting the new site plan approval language that we've reviewed and has been voted on by the planning board.
Tom, did you say that was the general bylaws?
General bylaws.
Thank you.
So there's a change of our, as we all know, the change of our site plan approvals. Anybody would like to speak to this article or have any questions for the planning board chair? Seeing no hands raised or no one indicating a desire to speak, is there a motion as to this planning board article concerning the site plan approval?
I'll make a motion.
Lori's motion, second. Seconded by Brian. Karen, could you call the voting roll?
Sure. Steve,
Yes.
Lori,
Yes.
Liz,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Andrew,
Yes.
Macy,
Yes.
Julia,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Aman,
Yes.
Ron,
Yes.
Judy,
Yes.
and Tom.
Yes.
Passes
Unanimous.
unanimously.
Okay, everybody, just a couple of things. We have a meeting tomorrow night. Nick Milano is going to be here. We're going to go, you're going to get a copy of the warrant, if not this evening, tomorrow morning. And we're going to have our opportunity to have Nick discuss any of those consent item type articles with us. And any other questions we may have concerning the physical printed warrant. He can come back another night. We can get Amy Dexter in here. So just think about that as you're thinking about things and formulating questions. Just alert me if you want Amy here. Secondly, we have meetings tomorrow and Wednesday, maybe even Thursday. But I've heard from a few of you that you may want the schools to come back in. I don't know if that's the case with everybody, but I know there has been discussion of maybe having them come in and present again to us or just answer some further questions. I would need to know that rather soon. So if anybody wants to really feel strongly about having the schools come in, please email me and just tell me what you'd like to know. I'm sure I can make those arrangements. I can speak to the chair. I can speak to someone else on the board. But I just like to know. We're in the midst of drafting the school comment. So sooner rather than later. So you don't have to tell me now. We can talk about it now if you want. But if you really want to see the schools come back in, please tell me, by tomorrow some point. And if there is a significant number, or if there are, I think, some really hard things that need to be answered, we can talk about it tomorrow and we can have them back in. Okay?
I have a question.
Does that work for everyone?
Yeah.
Jay, is that good with you?
I don't feel the need to have the schools come in, but
Okay, good.
that's just my opinion.
Okay. Ryan?
My question is, the presentation they did for us, is that on the this website?
Yes.
Yes.
Tom?
Judy?
Oh, thank you. So my query is, do we have enough time to cover all the departments that we haven't talked about?
We can discuss them when we're addressing the individual articles.
Okay, that was in regards to if you were having the schools come back, are we going to have enough time for?
Yeah, that is, I think, the main concern I have. Also, their schedule, which I don't know, but that's why I said if there's a strong desire for more than one or two people on the committee, I can work to have them come back in.
Okay, well, thank you. I was just wondering how our time was going. Thank you.
Okay. One last thing before we break. The lighting bylaw, the light trespass. I'm going to talk to Nick about that. Do we want a speaker to come in on that matter? We don't have to make the decision now.
It's back for May?
It's back for May. Now. So I would like to try to invite somebody in just to talk about it.
Somebody will come in and talk about it.
I thought they got pushed off.
It did, and then it miraculously reappeared last week.
Because it was going to be June.
So it's going to be
back.
June. Now it's back.
Yeah, why the urgency?
I think the main, I can't speak to specifically, I'm just spitballing that the main proponent of the article will no longer be on the select board in June. That's the only thing I can think of, and it's just an effort to kind of move the ball that's
Not our problem.
Yeah.
I think we need to have somebody come in. Do we need to have them come in before the warrant goes to print? Do we need to vote before the warrant goes to print?
We could just green sheet it. We could just green sheet the light comment. It's not, I don't think, a major issue, but we'd like to see somebody in here if I can get them in here. Sure.
Yes.
Would it be somebody like, I'm sorry to interrupt, but like an expert or something? Like
You want a lumen expert?
or somebody that has some,
We have Andrew.
We do have resident lumen.
He likes the moon. He likes
Wow.
lights.
Comment.
He's fantastic. He's
And hockey.
And hockey. Oh, you're a triple threat.
I always thought we should have someone come in and speak about this particular
The lumens?
article.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I will work on doing that. I'll talk to Nick about green sheeting that. Tomorrow, big night. Wednesday, big night. We'll be voting on a lot of articles. Nick Milano here to discuss.
I'm not sure if you said it and I missed it. So when do we get the full, I guess both full budgets, the full non-override budget and the full override budget, line by line, that we're going to be voting on?
We're going to find that out, Jerry.
Okay.
I'm going to send you the warrant, and then we'll talk to Mr. Milano.
You're going to send us the warrant, so that'll have everything printed in there.
Mhm.
Okay. I'd love a Excel version of that also.
Okay.
Okay.
Sure.
Wouldn't we all?
Yes,
I like it. I would take it.
I would.
Of course.
I would.
I'm sure he has it.
Thank
I
you.
have no doubt.
Of course.
You haven't asked for it yet, Jay?
I've been asleep at the wheel.
Find that hard to believe.
Can you have him, for the new members, note or annotate the consent items that he's going to cover tomorrow night so they can quickly read the ones that kind of fit that billing? Would that be helpful?
Well, yeah. I mean, I kind of know what the consent. I don't.
But the new
Bob
members.
Hess will send it. We'll set the consent.
Want for people.
I'm thinking for the rookies. right? Would you rather know that?
Why does it matter to us what's
The
on the consent
moderator.
agenda?
Someone will.
Why does it matter to us what's on the consent agenda?
No, I meant what did you say he's going to review tomorrow for the articles?
It's going to review like just all the general government bylaws and what I call the consent agenda, what they usually do.
So the non-financial things.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Is that interesting enough to talk about?
I don't know, Jay. Maybe not.
Oh,
You know, not to me at all.
Yeah.
0.
Yeah. Okay.
So someone it might be.
Is he going to be remote?
I don't know, Jay. He's going to be here. I'm sorry.
I've got a lot more
I'm
questions for you,
sorry.
Dom.
I don't
Will he
know.
wear a
What will he
tie?
be wearing? Yeah, exactly.
No, he will be wearing no tie. I think going with a blazer probably.
Very
Style.
sporty.
Maybe in a Oxford button down.
Crazy like a phone.
What's Nicolano?
I know, I haven't forgiven you.
Look at shine lights directly in. Sorry.
Anything anyone else would like to discuss? Okay.
Good job.
Good agenda for tomorrow. Good next couple of days. Send me an email about schools if you'd like to see them back.
Make a motion to-
I'm sorry. I felt like I was asking too many annoying questions, so I shut up. But I do have one more question. Are you saying or implying that we're not going to be talking about any of the financial articles tomorrow? Are you saying it's up in the air?
No, Jay. We're going to start with Article 1.
Okay.
And we're going to go through them all.
And vote?
Potentially.
Cool. Okay.
Do you see the agenda for tomorrow?
Yeah, I did. So if we get past the first few and get into ones with numbers, we'll be voting on those?
We could.
We could be.
I know there's a desire there was a talk about discussing schools tomorrow or maybe Wednesday.
Okay.
So we're just kind of see where the evening brings us.
I was just hoping we weren't limiting ourselves to, we're only going to look at the first 8 and then we're going home. And then
No,
it's
there's
Wednesday.
no limit. Everything's on there. I have to say for new members, if you wanted to stay till midnight, because that's as late as we can stay, we could do as much as we wanted to. So there's no limit. There's no limit what we want to talk about.
Start at 7 sharp.
The entire article, every article is on our agenda.
Get a good night's sleep.
There's a midnight.
I think I'm all set with that.
I think most people would be Macy. Midnight is the cutoff.
So let's start 7 sharp and pace ourselves for top speed. Motion to adjourn.
Andrew's got a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Aye. Thank you, Warrant Committee. Thank you, Milton.